Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, Jeff Waldorf. Good evening to everybody who's tuning in here on the live stream. We're streaming both on Facebook and YouTube as well. So if you're, on YouTube, please give us a like and a share. If you're on Facebook, also follow our page, facebook.com/TYTNation if you haven't already, because we've got some fantastic stories coming up. We've got Donald Trump's very cool defense of his business dealings with Russia. We also have some stories on economic stuff, mainly the layoffs when it comes to GM. So we've got a couple of stories, including people in Lordstown, Ohio, a place that went very much for Trump. How are they reacting? Well, we have one of people who actually worked there, who basically talked to the media, and we've got some of those quotes. They're pretty devastating. Then we have police brutality against one of their own. It's a very twisty twist kind of story, but ultimately has a terrible takeaway if you're black. So we've got that. And then finally, something from a little local when it comes to Michigan's drug laws, or I should say Michigan's new law on legal cannabis. So I know you guys are probably a little like, oh, why are you starting so late? This is going to be our new time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. So right before the Young Turks main show. So we're going to kind of lead into it. So it should be pretty interesting. So stick around and stay around here and then go right to TYT. So it kind of works out just great. TYT Nation, then TYT. Hey, awesome. Anyway, if you haven't already, please give us a like and a share on your various different platforms, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. And so that helps out the show. All right, guys. So let's get into the stories. Let's start out with a little bit of fun. Now, on Thursday, former Trump fixer and personal attorney Michael Cohen revealed in a plea agreement with Robert Mueller that Trump and his real estate company had been negotiating with Russia for a Trump Tower Moscow. As recently as of June of 2016, that is after that he was the GOP's presumptive nominee for president. So he's running for president, and he's got these business deals, or trying to do business deals, that will end up making him tons of money. Now, that development, by the way, interestingly enough, would have included a $50 million penthouse built for none other than Russian President Vladimir Putin, that he was just going to give to Putin as a gift. A gift for what? I don't know. I sure would love to find out. But, of course, we have a whole lot of ideas, but this is nothing more than speculation. Now, during the campaign, candidate Trump had insisted, oh, no, wait, I don't have any business dealings with Russia. Business dealings with Russia? Oh, no, I don't have any business dealings with Russia. I'm not talking to Russia. We have nothing to do with Russia. I mean, come on. You want to bring up Russia? Why don't they go and look for Hillary's emails if Russia is there? Or why don't the hackers look for the emails? That was the extent on Russia, right? Now, thanks to Cohen, we know that he did. So, hey, look, he was caught in another lie. So now he's come back and admitted, okay, so I did lie, but it's fine because all of this is very legal and very cool. Really? Now, I'm going to go to a tweet here from the president. He said, oh, I get it. I'm a very good developer, happily living my life. When I see our country going in the wrong direction, to put it mildly, against all odds, I decide to run for president and continue to run my business. Very legal and very cool. Talked about it on the campaign trail. So immediately I'm reading that and I'm like, this guy's like, oh, look at me. Poor me. I'm the victim here. I'm just minding my own business. And then I saw the country was just doing so terribly under Barack Obama. So I had to just step in. I had to give up everything, which he didn't, to go and step in to try to save this country, to make America great again. And it just so happened to culminate with me basically becoming the most powerful human being on earth. I mean, I didn't have to do it, but I had to do it because I had to make America great again. And the whole thing would cost me money, but I still had to do business. And that's why I had to do business. But I wasn't going to benefit from it or anything like that. And I could have lost the presidency, and then I would have had to fall back on my business. Wow. Okay, then. So I'm the victim. Great. Now, here's the thing about that. That's a lie. Him not losing any money from the presidency, from actually winning and running for office, complete fabrication. His business, Mar-a-Lago, hiked their fees to like $200,000 to become a member. And guess what? When he spends time in Mar-a-Lago, he calls it the Winter White House, right? And these people that want the ear of the president, will now pay this higher fee to get to meet the president. And of course, it's people that are business leaders, etc. You know what that money goes? That money goes right into their pocket. Now think about foreign dignitaries who want to strike some sort of deals or trade deals, etc. with Donald Trump, or get something in return. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to start staying at Trump properties, and then they'll come out and later on be like, oh, you know, the Trump Hotel in New York, that was really nice. Me and my staff, well, we stayed there, and we thought it was really nice, by the way. So let's get down to business. You think that doesn't happen? No, it's corruption 101. So, yeah, of course, that is a gigantic lie. And it's why we generally require that presidents give up their businesses. There was a president that had to give up his peanut farm because, it would be a conflict of interest. And so he put the good of the country above his own business dealings. That is not who we're dealing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump's like, no, my business interests are the most important thing. So no, why am I going to give that up? No, I'm not going to give it up at all. So there's another lie, of course, in there, and that's the most important one, is that, well, he's saying that I didn't talk about Trump Tower, or I did talk about Trump Tower Moscow on the campaign trail. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. But of course, look, he's pathological. Now, following his BS tweet, thankfully, the internet and social media stepped in. They did what they did best. And that is, of course, make fun of him. I'm going to read some tweets here because this is fun. Jared Yates Sexton tweets in, yes, when I get caught doing something that could be considered treasonous, I too make sure to refer to it as very legal and very cool, just so everyone knows it's on the level. Nice. Fen says, a very legal, very cool business is the opening pitch for a pyramid scheme. That's another great tweet. Jake Oliver says, very legal and very cool. T-shirts will be on sale at Urban Outfitters near you by Monday. Oh, I'm going to have to pick one of those up. I already have my very stable genius shirt, so I think I need to add to it. Eric McElroy says, very legal and very cool will be the title of Trump Jr.'s prison biography. And of course, if you're not sure what's going on here, when it comes to Don Jr., he might be next on Mueller's list. So, oh boy. And that, of course, has to do with the Trump Tower meeting itself. Now, Aaron's Cafe tweets, there's literally no clearer way to indicate criminal activity than to call your actions very legal and very cool. I love that, because that's true. Mike says, okay, where do I order my black t-shirt with white Helvetica? Very legal and very cool. Asking for my designer friends. As I said, I'd buy that shirt. Mike Johnson says, very legal and very cool is also the first line of my resume. Fun. And Silver Jesus says, changing your story from I never did it to of course I did it, and it's very legal and very cool is something that innocent people do all the time. Yes, the most innocent people always do that, because you just got to make sure to double down on how innocent that you are. Molly Knight says, Individual 1, as he is now known, because he is now in the midst of the Mueller investigation, he is now a person of interest, and is named Individual 1, would like everyone to know he is very legal, very cool. And finally, a little bit of historical context. David Futrell says, Richard Nixon, I am not a crook. Donald Trump, very legal and very cool. There are so many great quotes, though, you could put down for Donald Trump. Big water, ocean water, you know, it's full of Middle Eastern. But I think very legal and very cool when it comes to his own corruption is perfect. So, look, I don't know what's going to come from this, but from what I've seen, this whole situation with Cohen, tick-tock, tick-tock when it comes to Trump. But we'll see what develops, and we'll see what happens. Okay. That's your fun story. Now let's get to something more serious. So GM recently announced that it was closing 5 different plants in the United States and 1 in Canada, and cutting up to about 14,000 jobs, despite getting a massive tax cut from the Trump administration and Republicans. Now, that they said that these cuts would save the company around $4.5 billion by 2020. In fact, CEO Mary Barra told investors, quote, "The move will make General Motors more agile, resilient, and profitable, while the economy's still revving." Hey, well, how do you slow down the economy? You cut jobs. Apparently, they didn't quite get the memo that it's consumer demand that drives jobs. But anyway, so that statement right there kind of makes you think, well, wait a minute, maybe GM is struggling because they need to be resilient and profitable, right? And that, man, I guess this is a savvy business move. It kind of sucks that we've got to cut all these jobs, but we've got to retool and we've got to do all this stuff, right? To make sure that we are profitable into the future. Well, here's the thing. Wall Street took that and they're like, bravo, bravo. I love the fact that you cut so many jobs. In fact, we're going to reward you by hiking up the price of your stock by nearly 5%. That's how much their stock went up. But here's the thing. On Main Street, we know that GM is far from struggling. In fact, the company has apparently spent $10.6 billion since the year of 2015 buying back its own stock, according to filings with the SEC. Now, here's the thing. What do stock buybacks do? I mean, is buying back your stock good for the company? Well, no, it actually doesn't do anything for the company's productive capacity. It doesn't do anything for the workers. It doesn't do anything for innovation. It just basically is none other than a gift to shareholders. And that's it. It makes stocks more valuable. And when you're an investor or a senior executive, well then, guess what? You buy back your own stock, you end up making a ton of money when you cash out. Well, congratulations. These executives just made millions of dollars over the past few years in stock buybacks alone. And look, GM isn't the only company that's done this. We've seen a lot of companies do this, right? You had a bunch of corporations that once they got the tax cut, they took that money, and instead of investing it back into the company, they basically invested it right back into their own pockets. That's it. And look, this year alone, for example, corporations have announced nearly $1 trillion in buybacks, according to TrimTab's investment research. And the figure for the whole year could exceed $1 trillion. That is more than the student loan debt. That is more than credit card debt. And it's just these corporations taking their money and buying back their own stock, which does nothing than other than put money into the executives' pockets. That's it. That's the only function, is just to make rich people even richer. But of course, look, you can't put all the blame on the GOP tax cuts. GM actually started doing this program back in 2015. Now, that's less than 6 years after a bankruptcy process, which cost us, the taxpayer, $11 billion. See, we bailed GM out. We bailed them out. We gave them taxpayer money because their company was failing, because they were putting out substandard vehicles and they were taking too many risks, and they weren't profitable. So the American taxpayer, the American government, took our money during the financial crisis, and instead of helping regular people, homeowners that were underwater, well, we gave GM, we gave these companies billions of dollars. And we said, okay, now be solvent and actually create jobs. Now what happened? For a while, they were profitable, and they still are profitable. And yes, there were a lot of jobs that are saved. But now, after massive tax cuts and deregulation, well, now this company says 15,000 workers, nearly 15,000 workers, we're going to get rid of you. And we're going to get rid of several car lines. We're going to shutter some factories. And hey, sad day for you, right? And that's it. Now, the GM, as I said before, had announced $5 billion worth of stock buybacks. This is how much they spent in March 2015. And then they added another $4 billion later that year, and in 2017, announced a further $5 billion in buybacks. Now, how much have they actually done so far? They've been on about $1.6 billion in stock buybacks, but they plan to do much more. Now, here's the problem with this. If they have the money for stock buybacks, then certainly they've got the money to retool these plants to create more SUVs and trucks, which are right now more popular in America anyway. And low gas prices, more Americans want to drive gas guzzlers. They want to drive big trucks. They want to drive big SUVs. And of course, you had sales of sedans that were declining. And look, we understand that that's just basically market forces at work. But what they could do is, okay, here's what we're going to do. We know that the cars like the Chevy Cruze, I have one, by the way, and other small compact sedans, they're not selling as well. So let's retool our plants to actually go and build vehicles that American people want. And that's fair, right? And that's business, right? Now, instead of doing that, they're shipping production of the Chevy Blazer to Mexico, pulling the plug on the Cruze, the Volt, and most of the rest of their sedans. And so they're moving production to other places and ending certain cars, right? The production of certain cars. They don't need to do that, though. And so they just cost a lot of jobs for basically no reason. And here's the thing. They've gotten rewarded by the markets for doing this. You know, good job firing 14,000 people around the holidays and then stuffing more money in the pockets of your executives. Again, they were not broke. They had money. GM, for example, even if they didn't have the tax cuts, even if they didn't already have all this profit lined up, which, by the way, in the first 3 quarters of 2018, they made $6 billion in revenue. Now, they also have, in profit, $6.5 billion sitting overseas right now. Now, they could use that to save the jobs. They could use that to save the plants, right? I mean, look, here's the thing. They could repatriate that money. It's not like the Republican tax cuts didn't include a gigantic tax holiday. No, that was one of the centerpieces. Even though, of course, when Bush did it, it failed. It failed spectacularly. Okay, all these corporations brought home billions of dollars in revenue, and what happened? They ended up cutting jobs anyway, and that's what happened. Now the Republicans claim, oh no, this is going to create jobs if you repatriate money and cut taxes for corporations and the rich. But what did it do? Well, we're obviously seeing what's happening now. We're seeing massive layoffs. We're seeing shuttering of plants. We're seeing all this manufacturing that is moving out of the country. Still, even after we gave them everything that they wanted, everything that they had asked for, it is never enough. It is never enough for them. And this isn't some left-wing talking point. You can see this happening right in front of your eyes. We've given them everything they wanted. And they're still, again, cutting jobs, outsourcing, and paying you substandard wages. I thought your wages were supposed to go up. So some of you got a one-time bonus. And that's nice, but it's scraps compared to what you would have actually gotten had you have been guaranteed a living wage, a wage that kept up with both inflation and productivity. But here's the thing. Republicans and corporations are lying to you because, look, Republicans are on the side of business. They're owned by business lock, stock, and barrel. The businesses themselves are amoral profit-making machines. That is their only purpose, is to make more profit. And so people have to stop being surprised at the idea that corporations don't actually care about you. Oh, what are you talking about? My business cares about me. My business cares about America. We're an American business. No, they're not. They're multinational. These things are not people. They are robots. And they have been programmed to do one thing, to extract profit at any cost. Not cost to them, cost to you. And so if replacing you with a robot costs them less money, well, then they're going to do it. If moving to Mexico costs them less money than continuously employing Americans, then that's what they're going to do. If making certain things costs them less money, or using less inferior materials, or cutting corners, if that costs them less money, they're going to do it. That's why you have rules. That's why you have regulations. I know Republicans talk as if some regulations are some terrible things, but it's really just rules on what you can and cannot do. And it is setting boundaries for these corporations who, again, his main concern is squeezing as much profit out for their shareholders as they can. You've got to have rules to constrain what they can and can't do in the pursuit of that profit. It just makes sense. So again, they have no loyalty to a country. They have no loyalty to a state or a community. They are loyal to profit, and that is it. So don't be surprised. Don't be shocked that even after giving them everything that they've wanted on bailouts and tax cuts, that they will still end up choosing the option that will get them the most short-term profit, because that is how they operate today. I don't know what to do to change that, but I do know what we should do is we should stop giving them money. We should stop bailing them out. You want to believe in an actual free market? Well, then maybe we should actually let the free market play out. We should have let them play out in, when they were crashing. And instead of bailing them out, just let them fall. And have other people replace them. Have other companies replace them. Maybe it would have been better long term had these companies failed. Had we actually had a free market, which we don't. The free market actually doesn't necessarily even exist. It's a hypothetical. But what we need is a regulated market with a strong labor base, with strong labor rights, strong labor unions, living wages, etc., with benefits. By the way, benefits like, for example, Medicare for All would actually help businesses because they wouldn't have to pay for medical costs of their employees. They wouldn't have to worry about it. And the employees wouldn't have to worry about staying at a job that they hate or they can't do because of medical costs. So it's a win-win. What we need is we need better policy. We need good policy, and we need rules to constrain these companies to make sure that we police them into doing the right thing. Because, as you've seen, giving them everything that they want is obviously not working. We need to try something else. Okay. Let's move on. Another related story. So GM recently announced that they are closing several plants and laying off thousands of their workers. It's about 14,300 workers are losing their jobs. This is a mix of production workers and management. Now, one of those plants that is closing is Lordstown, Ohio. Now, Lordstown, Ohio voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in the 2016 election. Now, that's, of course, partly based on Trump promising to protect the jobs in that plant, which is the only production plant in Ohio. Now, some of the workers who are losing their jobs are taking their frustrations out on the president for basically lying to them. Now, a woman who has spent the last 20 years working at the GM plant in Lordstown said in a recent interview that she basically blames President Trump for the closure of that plant and the loss of her job. Now, this is Nanette Centers, right? And she's 55 years old. She's been working at this plant for, as it said, 20 years. And she talked to Vox magazine. Now, Vox published this interview on Thursday. And in it, Centers said that she was shocked by the automaker's plans to close its facility in Ohio and accused the president of giving workers at the plant false hope at a rally in the state by telling people that he would bring jobs back. Now, the jobs leaving the state obviously is the opposite of bringing jobs in. The jobs are leaving. And this has been happening all over. It's been happening at Carrier, Harley-Davidson, a lot of these other corporations. They're pulling jobs out. They're relocating plants overseas. They are laying off American workers. This is after Trump and the Republican Party basically gave them everything they wanted when it comes to tax cuts and deregulation. So that's what's going on here. Now, Centers told Vox, quote, "All the president's rhetoric has divided the workforce horribly. I was here when Trump had a rally last summer. He said, don't sell your house. Don't worry about that. I'm going to bring your jobs back." And again, none of that happened. Tax cuts did not create more jobs. It actually led to more stock buybacks and higher executive pay. GM, for example, their CEO made $22 million. And what's going on with the economy actually is this, look, they've been coasting off a high achieved under the Obama administration. Now, that is to say that Wall Street and big corporations were still doing really well under Obama, and they're doing even better today. This is all while Americans, American workers, the middle class, the working class, have been suffering under stagnant wages and disappearing benefits for decades. So let's be honest about the Obama economy and the Clinton economy under, Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush. All of this goes back to Reagan, union busting. That is when the decline of unions began to really take off. And with the decline of unions, you've had a decline in wages, working conditions, and benefits to go along with it. So let's be honest about what happened. Okay, this isn't the fault of Donald Trump. It's not the fault of, Bill Clinton. It's not quite the fault of President Obama. Although all of them have contributed negatively in their own way. For example, George W. Bush with his gigantic tax cuts for the rich. And then, of course, you add in President Trump's gigantic tax cuts that have not helped the situation, and the assault on labor rights by Republicans and Democrats over the years. So, anyway, now, here's the thing. None of this has gotten better. It's all gotten worse. And some people, I should say a lot of people, have been seeing that that was the case for the whole time. For example, back to Centers, she said, quote, "From day one, I could see what he was. The way he managed to give people false hope." And that's what a right-wing populist does. And I say populist with a little bit of reservation, because really, when you're right-wing, you can't necessarily be a populist. Still, he talked about, we're going to protect your jobs. We're going to save your jobs. We're going to make sure that you have money, and it's going to be great, and you're going to have fantastic jobs, and you're going to make even more money, even though I don't believe in a minimum wage. I think we should get rid of it, etc. But the markets, the free markets, right? Well, all those promises came to what? Nothing. Nothing. Now, Centers says that basically tells Vox what she sees as incredibly disturbing among people who are still enamored with President Trump. She said, quote, "A lot of people are still hoping he will save them now. It's disturbing." Well, look, I've got news for those people, right? MAGA guys, you still watching, right? Trump's not going to come and save you. He's never going to come save you. That wasn't the point. Even if he did care, which I highly doubt he does not, the guy's not even smart enough to save himself. I mean, you look at that guy and you hear the things that he has to say. You just sit there and listen to him at a rally when he's talking. Do you honestly think that that is a smart person? That he is a very stable genius? Do you honestly think that? But here's the thing, kind of the genius way, and I saw this in a study. He basically, Trump, talks in a way that allows his fans, people that actually respect him and look at him and follow him, to fill in the sentences with the things that they want to hear. So he's as vague as possible when he's talking. Oh, some people say this. And then, well, I hear from there. And this is what it could be. And you hear all that stuff. And your mind fills in the blanks with whatever you want. And so that's why they're like, oh, Trump, he speaks to me. He understands completely. No, no, no. You filled in the blanks. He is intentionally vague. And so, and it's not some weird trick. It's just a marketing trick. You get people to fill in what you're saying with their own thoughts. And they're like, what a genius. God, you're a genius. You think just like me. Well, obviously, this guy's got my best interest at heart. It really is fascinating. But nonetheless, again, he's not a smart person. He's a pathological liar. He's a grifter. And he tells you everything that you want to hear. And he has made a career out of screwing people over. Screwing over banks, screwing over customers, screwing over regular people. Trump University is a great example of that. Now, look, she also added that while there is a lot of blame to go around, there's a lot of it goes to our president. Now, why is that? Right? And you could say that, and critics could discount that. Oh, you just don't like President Trump. He's just trying to make America great again. And you're just crapping all over him. Look at the economy. Look at black unemployment, etc. Well, no. Here are some actual concrete reasons. For one, you've got the trade war, right? Now, because of Donald Trump's tariffs, you have the price of steel that's gone way up. Now, that's obviously going to impact business. Now, as I pointed out before, while it does have an impact, GM is still deeply profitable. It is a very profitable company. And a lot of these companies are very profitable. It's just that, well, the price of steel went up. So obviously we need to cut jobs because we want to protect our profit margin. And actually we want to add to our profit margin so that we can buy back our own stocks and stick that money back in our own pockets. Of course, right? Nonetheless, okay, you have the price of things that are increasing thanks to the trade war with China. Okay. But, you also have deregulation. No, wait a minute. Republicans say that deregulation is fantastic for business. What are you talking about? Businesses love deregulation. It's actually really great. Well, there are some regulations that have big impacts on the way business actually is handled. One of them is the corporate average fuel economy standard. So that's something that Trump had repealed. And now Centers actually said, quote, I think it all started when Trump repealed that CAF standard. When he did so, that gave GM more of an incentive to get rid of the Chevy Cruze and do restructuring. Now, the Cruze, again, wasn't a huge seller, but since they had this standard, it helped them to be able to manufacture both those mid-sized cars and smaller cars, as well as their big gas guzzling trucks, and still end up being insanely profitable. In fact, she said that the CAF standard meant that you could produce small cars that are energy efficient, and that would kind of balance out the building of big trucks and gas guzzlers. Building the Cruze meant that GM could also build as many trucks and still meet those same fuel efficiency standards. Those standards are now gone. And so the standards are gone. There's really no incentive to build the Chevy Cruze anymore. There's no incentive to build the hybrids anymore. So we're just going to switch to doing what sells the most and what gets us most bang for our buck. And right now, that is gas guzzling, pickup trucks and SUVs. So screw the small car market. Even if we end up having to close all of these different plants that create these smaller cars. Sad day for you. Now, Lordstown, of course, is where they made the Chevy Cruze. And look, as I mentioned, I have one. I think it's actually really good on gas. That's what I want. I want something that is cheap to drive. And look, if I had the cash, I'd actually go with a hybrid car. But it is what it is, right? And the Cruze is a decent car. It's good on gas. I don't regret my purchase. At least on that. but it's being phased out because of something that Donald Trump actually did. And so here's something that he did that had a direct negative impact on people's jobs and employment. And that said, repealing those standards, they didn't have to lead to job losses. But unfortunately, you have a corporation, or I should say every corporation is the same way, always puts profit ahead of people. They made roughly $6 billion in the first 3 quarters of 2018. They gave their CEO $22 million in compensation. That is 300 times the average a worker in their plants actually makes. And since 2015, they have used a lot of that money. They've planned to spend about $10 billion on stock buybacks. It's actually spent about $1.6 billion so far. So they're an insanely profitable company. They did not have to do this. They did not have to get rid of those lines. They were profitable before. So, but anyway, now going back to Stenter. Now, when pressed in the interview about reports about that some GM workers are asking the president to cancel government contracts with GM as sort of a way to punish them or incentivize them to try to, do something, not ship the Chevy Blazer down to Mexico to have them produce it there for a lot cheaper, right? Or shut down, or I should say have them restart some of these plants in Ohio and Michigan and Toronto, things like that. Well, Stenters believes that that's actually a good idea in theory, but that Trump, he doesn't care and is not willing to put his money where his mouth is. So I think that's true. I think there's a pretty good indication that he's not actually going to do anything that's going to help. And if he does try to do something, it's going to be so ham-handed and so completely wrong, or maybe even overkill, that it's going to end up making the situation worse. But Stenter says, so many of my workers, around half of them, are still putting their hopes on Trump. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he does do something about the thousands of jobs companies are still sending abroad, but he hasn't done anything about Carrier, Honeywell, or Harley-Davidson. So those are 3 of those companies, right, that ended up, even after getting massive tax breaks. And Carrier is actually one of the more interesting ones because Carrier was one of the first companies to negotiate with the Trump organization to have the Trump the Trump administration and Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, when he was governor of Indiana, give out massive tax breaks and subsidies to Carrier on the promise that they will keep their plant in Indiana. Well, what happened? Carrier is moving down somewhere else where the labor is cheaper, because that's what they do. If there is a cheaper way for them to do something, they're going to do it, because these are corporations that don't actually care about Indiana. You think Carrier cares about Indiana? No, they don't care about them. They don't care about the worker. They don't care about their promises made to Donald Trump or to anyone. The thing is that they're going to do whatever makes them the most profit, because that's how they're designed. Our system basically incentivizes that too. We have programmed these robots, these machines, to extract profit at basically any cost to anything other than itself. Okay? So here's the thing, right? So now, will Trump do anything about it? Of course not, as I already mentioned that. For one, look, corporations and wealthy donors. He's not going to do anything that possibly impacts him, because he is a wealthy person, supposedly, and he's a business owner. So is he going to punish business owners? No. And the other thing is, if he could do something, what could he actually do? I don't know. I don't see a way to fix this, right? To stop these companies from going overseas without like specifically targeting them. And I don't necessarily think that that's a good idea. But I do know one thing we shouldn't do: bail out and subsidize corporations that outsource. Right? If you're a company that would rather outsource all their labor and then sell in the United States. You shouldn't do that. We shouldn't bail you out. You shouldn't get a dime of taxpayer money. Because as we've seen, cutting corporate tax rates and giving them subsidies and giving them special deals and breaks doesn't work. The profit does not trickle down. The wealth does not trickle down. It does not create jobs. The only thing that creates that creates jobs is a strong middle class with demand. A strong middle class that has been created and maintained through strong labor rights, labor unions, worker protections, and higher wages. Only that middle class can create enough demand in the country to continue to create jobs and sustain economic growth. And that's it. And we are far, far from that kind of system. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break here. We'll come back. We've got more stories, including the Twisty Twist story with 3 police officers now under indictment. It's of course, we're dealing with St. Louis, and so know that there's going to be a lot of, or I should say, a few twists and turns. I don't want to give too much away. Just come back or stay here, and I'll be back for that story. You're going to love it. Stay right here. All right, we'll be back around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. I got a super chat to read here from Michael McAllister, who says, unions only exist as a shield against capitalism. Skip the unions, form cooperatives, nationalize the energy, education, transportation, real estate, and finance industries. Workers of the world unite. Wow. So that's a big step. Look, right now, I think... Look, I see the goal, and hey, I agree with the goal. But, like, we need to walk before we can run. So I don't see any of that happening while labor rights are right now under attack as much as they are, and basically eroded to nothing. So, nonetheless, thank you for that, Michael. All right, so Super Chat is how you help the show, or one of the different ways you can help the show out. You can also go through Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. You can share this stream. You can share out our videos. By the way, if you haven't already, please like and share the stream. That would help out a lot. Not only that, but there's also Venmo you can donate to the show on, and all that stuff. So thank you guys for supporting independent progressive media. Couldn't do this without you. All right. That said, let's dive into this disastrous story here. St. Louis police. Hold on here. Okay. A St. Louis police officer has been indicted for assaulting a fellow undercover officer. So now this is a interesting story here. There's a couple of interesting twists here, and it also gives you an insight into how cops see protesters, specifically black protesters. Okay. So now protests happened in St. Louis in 2017 as a result of the acquittal of an officer named Jason Stockley. So here's your context for the story. Now, according to the Washington Post, Stockley had killed 24-year-old Anthony Lamar Smith in December 2011 after chasing him following an alleged drug buy. Now, Stockley had an unauthorized personal AK-47 on the scene. It was recorded on dash cam during the chase, saying he was, quote, going to kill Smith. Okay, well, you wasn't kidding, because that's exactly what happened. He shot and killed Smith. Not only that, but he was also alleged to have planted a weapon in Smith's car to try to justify the shooting. Well, I mean, what was I going to do? He was armed. He was armed. He was a scary black man with a gun. And I just happen to have a gun, and I'm an off-duty officer. Who are you going to believe? Me or the dead guy? Me and the dead drug dealer, right? So, of course, they believed him. In 2016, local prosecutors had charged Stockley with first-degree murder and trying to plant false evidence. However, he was acquitted in September of 2017. Apparently, there wasn't enough to pin a murder charge on him. And so, like, well, free to go. Free to go. Yeah, you killed this guy and allegedly planted a weapon, but you know what? Free to go anyway. Now, after that, St. Louis erupted in protest. Massive protests. Now, here's where the current story and the current indictments come into play. Now, St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department officer Dustin Boone was actually looking forward to these protests, right? So, again, he's a police officer, and after this acquittal, St. Louis erupted, as you would expect when there's a massive miscarriage of justice. So now, Boone wants these protests, but it's not because he actually agrees with them and wants justice. No. Quite the opposite, actually, as we've seen from certain text messages. In fact, on September 15th of 2017, the day of the verdict, he said, quote, "It is going to get ignorant tonight." When it comes to the protests, obviously. So basically calling anybody who wants justice for Anthony Lamar Smith, well, you're ignorant. It's going to get ignorant tonight out in the streets. In fact, it gets worse. He says, quote, "It's going to be a lot of fun beating the hell out of these shitheads once the sun goes down and nobody can tell us apart." So in case you weren't clear, he can't wait to get out and beat up protesters. But there's more. Other texts included Myers, who was another officer, who suggested they, quote, "whoop some ass." Boone boasted about how he would beat people up that when they don't act right and, quote, "just grab protesters and toss them around." Okay, that's very clear. We can tell how he feels about these protests. Now, during the demonstrations, 2 days after the verdict, Boone had responded to a question of how he and his team were dealing with it. He said, quote, "A lot of cops getting hurt, but it's still a blast beating people that deserve it. I'm enjoying it every night." To me, what they're saying is, look, we like doing police brutality against black people. We can't wait to do more. And just like Stockley said he was going to kill Smith, these guys ended up beating up a black protester. In fact, according to prosecutors, Boone and 200 officers, Randy Hayes, as I mentioned before, Christopher Myers, all those 3 officers threw a man to the ground and viciously beat him with a riot baton. So they said they were going to do it, that they were going to beat up protesters, and that's what they did. Now, based on those text messages, they had to have been, they knew what they were doing was wrong, right? And so, but nonetheless, you're going to get people who defended that, right? Well, that protester must have had it coming, right? No, it turns out these officers beat that man even though he was complying with their instructions. 100%. And we've seen this 100 times, right? If you comply, even if you comply, if you're black, there's a better chance of you getting either shot or beat up. And that's it. So now, here's the thing. The man that they ended up beating up was beaten so badly that he couldn't eat, and then he ended up losing 20 pounds. In fact, he's still recovering. And the officers, after that beating, it's not that they were remorseful. Oh, no. They loved it. In fact, Hayes was quoted as saying, "Going rogue does feel good." So they knew what they were doing was wrong. Now, too bad for them that the man that they ended up savagely beating was actually one of their own. Oops. According to the St. Louis Dispatch, the man originally identified as LH turned out to be Luther Hall. Now, Luther Hall is a veteran city police officer who was working undercover during the protests. Though he made no effort to resist, and this is really important, the 3 officers still brutally beat Hall. Now, look, if you're an undercover officer and you're, trying to keep your cover, obviously, and you're approached by other officers, well, then you're going to comply. So this isn't an issue of, oh, he was resisting arrest and he was whatever. No, he was actually doing what he's supposed to do because he himself knows the rules. He himself complied. But it doesn't matter if you comply because these 3 men were out on a mission to beat up protesters. They didn't care. They didn't care. Now, Hall ended up being left with a 2-centimeter hole above his lip, an injured tailbone, and back injuries that required surgery, and still hasn't recovered enough to return to work. In the weeks afterwards, and it gets worse, prosecutors say the 3 police officers, in an effort to cover their ass, gave false statements about the arrest and even directly contacted Hall to try to dissuade him from pressing charges. Myers also allegedly destroyed Hall's cell phone. Prosecutors say another officer, Bailey Coletta, who has also been indicted, who was romantically involved with Hayes, by the way, also lied to investigators about the assault, according to the indictment. Boone, Hayes, and Myers faced charges of depriving Hall of his constitutional rights and conspiring to obstruct justice. Myers also faces a charge of destroying evidence, and Coletta herself is charged with obstructing, influencing, and impeding a grand jury. Now, these are just indictments. These are serious charges, though, right? And so they're going to have to go to court, and they're going to have to find the evidence or present the evidence in a way that convinces a grand jury. Now, the thing is that these 4 people are being defended by the police union and not the guy who got savagely beat. Here you have police officers who couldn't wait to beat up a black protester, whether or not they were following the law, whether or not they were being compliant. And the guy that they happened to find was being compliant because he was a police officer. And yet, they don't care. When they beat him up, they were like, oh no, let's go and lie. Let's break the law, lie to prosecutors, lie to investigators, try to threaten, I believe, Hall, breaking his phone, all this stuff. And so, look, this is gross on so many counts. Again, police officers breaking the law because they think it's fun to beat up on protesters when they're black. These protesters were looking for justice. And it's sickening to know that these are the types of people that are hired to protect and serve. They're not protecting or serving anything. And think about it. If it weren't a fellow officer, if it had just been a black protester, would this be a major case? Would there be any question? Oh, no, he was resisting arrest, of course. Well, what are you going to believe? The police officer or just a random black protester? I mean, come on. This would probably end up being just another day in America if it weren't a police officer. And when you think about that, man, it's disastrous. I mean, police, if you're a black person, you know that they're not there to protect and serve you, right? Even if you're an officer, you're still not one of them. The union won't back you, but they'll back your alleged attackers. If you're one of them, you're still not one of them. And if the grand jury acquits these officers too, which is a possibility, then I think that tells you all you need to know about the state of policing and race relations in America. Now, I hope there is justice. I hope that they do find the evidence and justice is served for what has been a horrific, brutal beating and a brutal case. But based on what we've seen lately, I don't have a lot of faith in that system. So we'll have to see. Okay. I don't think I have enough time. I don't. So, all right. Well, I will have to do the marijuana story on Monday. So, again, new time. This is Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, right before the Young Turks. So tune in right here, TYT Nation, and then go right from here to the Young Turks. All right. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Like out our videos. Share those as well. Share our clips on Facebook. And all that goes to help the show. And if you want to donate, patreon.com/TYT Nation. Thanks for all you guys coming in and watching the show. And liking and sharing and donating on Patreon, etc. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Have an awesome weekend. We'll come back Monday. We'll see you right here on Around the Nation. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, Nation. We'll see you guys on Monday.